This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Hey, let's put some Snickerdoodle cookies in the jar today. Start by getting 2 sticks of butter. If you've let them sit out a little bit, that works well too because they start to soften up. But if not, just let them whip around in your mixer a bit until they do soften up. Once the butter gets nice and soft, put in about 1.5 cups of sugar and then let the sugar and the butter cream together until it gets nice and fluffy. Go ahead and add 2 eggs, but put them in one at a time. That way the mixer can beat the first one up real well before you add the second one. For flavoring, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now once you put the vanilla in, let that mix up, but then stop the mixer and scrape down your bowl just to make sure that you've got all the bits of butter and egg nicely mixed into your batter. Then put the mixer on for another minute or so and you'll see we'll get this nice fluffy batter, and that's just what we want before we add our dry ingredients. So let's get our dry ingredients together. Let's go ahead and measure out 2 3/4 cups of just an all-purpose flour. I use an unbleached flour, but you can use whatever you've got in your pantry. Now when measuring out all your dry ingredients, I like to measure them into a separate little bowl, not right into the mixer. And the reason is that way I don't get pockets of salt or pockets of baking soda. So once we get the flour in, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. The cream of tartar is what gives this cookie its little bit of a bite. And then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Then give that a little stir with your knife or a whisk or something just to break everything up and get it nicely incorporated. So now it's time to put the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. So put your mixer on a low speed and just slowly start putting in the flour mixture. If you go too fast on the mixer, the flour is just going to spray all over the place. So go slow and just slightly put the flour in just a little bit at a time. Then just keep your mixer going until everything is mixed up. You don't want to overbeat it, just enough. And then scrape everything off your beater, and it's time to start getting ready to get the cookies on the cookie sheet. I do like to give the bowl one last scrape down just to make sure that I'm not missing anything in the very bottom of the bowl. Okay, so now we have to get the cinnamon sugar ready. We're going to mix in 3 tablespoons of sugar with 3 teaspoonfuls of ground cinnamon. And that cinnamon sugar mix is what we roll the little balls of cookie dough in before we put them on the baking sheet. Get your oven preheating to 400 degrees and then get a piece of parchment and put on your cookie sheet. For these cookies, I'm going to use a medium-sized ice cream scoop and get a scoopful of dough and pop it into my cinnamon sugar mixture. This coating of cinnamon sugar is what makes that beautiful crackle effect we'll see at the end when the cookies are done baking. Once you get your tray filled up, we'll go ahead and put them in the oven and they'll bake for just about 8 minutes. The edges should just begin to start getting brown. These are not a dark cookie. They should still be very light when you pull them out of the oven. Once that first sheet is in the oven, go ahead and get the next tray of cookies ready to go in the oven. That way, once you pull one out, you've got the second one ready to pop right in the oven. Here's a little trick I came up with when I'm baking cookies. I use these stackable cooling racks, and what that allows me to do is when I take a sheet of cookies out of the oven, I can pop them right onto that cooling rack. Then I can take my second set of cookies and pop those into the oven and set the timer. Now, I don't like to let my cookies sit on the cookie sheet. That's why I use the parchment. So immediately I slide them off so that they're starting to cool and not continuing to bake on that hot pan. Then I can use a second rack and stack that on top. I don't have a very big kitchen, so I have to kind of go up with the cooling racks. Here comes my second tray of cookies, put them on, and then I've got my third one ready to go. It really makes it a fairly efficient process. Now this recipe of Snickerdoodles makes about 5 dozen cookies. Well, my racks only stack up 3 high, so what do I do with those other 2 dozen cookies? Well, once I get my 4th dozen in the oven, what I start to do is I start to condense the first 2 racks of cookies that have already cooled pretty well. So obviously get that cookie sheet out from under those freshly baked cookies, and then I start with my second rack and I start to put those down on the first rack. They're cool enough now, they're not going to break, and just kind of put them down there. Once I have that second layer of cookies down below, I can take that top rack off, which is with the hot cookies, and then put the rest down, take that parchment off. I can use that piece of parchment again for another batch of cookies. And then just kind of rearrange the racks so that the hot cookies are still safe and nicely cooled, and then the ones that are cool enough are fine on and safe on the first rack. Once your cookies are all nice and cool, fill your cookie jar. I hope you enjoy these Snickerdoodles. They're definitely one of my family's favorites. If you'd like to try making these cookies at home, just go to our website and visit the cookie jar show notes and you can get the recipe. Also, if you have any questions or ideas, send us an email. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.